Hi, I'm Dr. Park, and today I want to talk about how destructive a lover's quarrel can be in a family. As a young doctor working in ER emergency room, I have witnessed something that was very disturbing. It was a DOA case. DOA means death on arrival. Now, it was a female patient that was stabbed 13 times with a kitchen knife by her husband. And this really, really bothered me. For months, I couldn't get that out of my head. Not just the way she looked. She was stabbed 13 times. I was wondering, how can somebody hate somebody so much? And we're talking about someone they loved each other. And I started playing this over and over again in my head. I'm thinking they started as lovers who felt like they need nothing else but each other. And then they promised forever. And then dispute starts. It gets heated up and they start accusing each other of each other's fault and saying hurtful things intentionally. And then they just couldn't stop. And they try the isolation, Cold War. And if that doesn't work, they start to get violent. And then at one point, somebody loses their temper and it ends in tragedy. So I start thinking to myself, if I ever get into this kind of situation where I feel like there's no going back or there's no turning away from it, it is really better for each other to separate and live their life. A few months later, I was training in pediatric department, and I came across very interesting research. It was about PTSD in children, which is post-traumatic stress disorder due to their parents fighting. So what they did was they measured the vital signs, which is heart rate, blood pressure, and respiration rate, while their parents were fighting. And the vital signs were off the chart. It was very similar to a soldier who had a near-death experience in a war. And they also did it where they knew their parents were not fighting, but they actually played a recording of their parents fighting. But even the kids who knew this was not a real, they were having the same vital signs going off the chart. So this is something that they struggle for the rest of their life. And I would recommend you to see a movie called Into the Wild, and this is a small part of it. This is a true story of a very bright young man who was accepted in Harvard Law School, but he was brought up in a very abusive family. Watching their parents fight, him and his sister were suffering from PTSD, and they were not able to build their characters properly, and they become antisocial. And after all this, he decided to give up everything, and he runs away, trying to find the true meaning of life, trying to find what's good in life, trying to see what the world has to offer for him. And he has some of his own little adventures and also meets good friends on the way, but he could never seem to settle in one place. And he ends up in Alaska trying to survive by himself. And he gets trapped in the forest, can't get out, and all alone by himself, he dies lonely and hungry in starvation. So when the parents are fighting, first reaction for the babies or the kids are to cry, desperate trying to stop them from fighting, and they're genuinely scared. And if that doesn't work, they fall into despair, thinking their whole world has just crumbled down. And then they try the anger tactic. They try to get angry at you, try to stop you from fighting. And if that doesn't work, they feel hopeless, helpless, and then they feel lonely. And then they start to disconnect. And then they start wondering about, what if my mom and dad gets divorced? Who do I live with? What is my life gonna be like? And then they start to put distance between them and you. And then they pretend like nothing ever happened, but inside they're lost. And to make things worse, most parents after the fight, they don't make up in front of their kids. They actually make up where there's nobody around, in their own privacy. So next day when they come out acting like nothing ever happened, Kids get very confused and angry and rebellious and also antisocial, and they become a loner. They don't trust anybody. They want to be alone. And then they start looking for their way out. And they gravitate toward friends. Not all friends are good friends. And they have a higher percentage of drinking alcohol, doing drugs, and they have a higher percentage of becoming alcoholic or drug addict. And young ladies tend to gravitate toward older men outside the house looking for their father figure. Same with the boys. And they have a higher chance of teen pregnancy and suicide, mental disorder, anger management issue, and they grow up to be very abusive adults themselves. Another surprising fact is that most of us are nicer to strangers and co-workers than our family. So at the very early stage of our marriage, I told my wife, this is a teamwork. We have to work together. And we sat and talked about how we're going to handle our conflict and our arguments. And even if you're married for a long time, you guys really sit and talk about this when you're in a good term and try to solve the problem. And what we promised was never to lie, because when you lie and somebody feels betrayed, and that's what sparks the big fights. And if you have to lie, then don't do it. And focus on the problem and solution, not the emotion. And once you make a promise and come up with a solution, keep the promise. And apologize and forgive. And even if you're angry, hug each other. Skinship could do magics. And don't go to bed angry. And the kids will watch you and they will learn to give love, accept love, apologize, to forgive, and to know how to have a really strong relationships. And they will grow up to be secure, happy adults. Don't get me wrong, we still have our lovers quarrel and some disputes, but we're always trying hard to get back to our normalcy so we could really enjoy this life together. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell, select the top, and you'll be notified with more great videos. Thank you.